What's going on, guys? A few people here so far. Get things started a bit. Just want to let it open up a bit and kind of get some people in here. I know we're supposed to start at 12:30, but just want to get it open and get started. If you have any questions right now, I'll start answering stuff like that. But for now, we're just going to wait a little bit, get everybody in here. And then we'll start talking about, first off, we're going to start talking about the Monday updates that we normally do. And then from there, first off, can everybody hear me pretty good? You're still good there? Not totally sure on that. This is the first time we've done it on YouTube. Generally, it's on Instagram, which is through the phone. But I just want to make sure that everyone can hear us through the microphone on the laptop. So if you can shoot me a chat and then make sure that we're doing good, that'd be rad. Loud and clear. All right, sounds good. So give it a couple more minutes. I know we only have 5 people in here right now. But yeah, basically we're going to cover our normal Monday updates, stuff that we found at races, stuff that we're going to be coming out with, more information on existing stuff, and just kind of stuff that we find out on the web. Definitely want to start just talking and getting to know people a bit better. And then, of course, after we're done with that, we're going to jump into the soldering lessons. So I started doing solder. I thought, like, as I was writing everything down to kind of prepare a little bit, kind of figured we would just kind of move it into a whole, like, little bit of a wiring video. So we'll go over the type of solder that I use, the soldering iron that I use, the tools that I use to help along with all the solder jobs and all the work. I don't have any 10 gauge on me at the moment, but I'm going to try and go over the best I can and explain different techniques to remove the wires from the speed controls, how to clean excess solder off the speed controls so everything is a little bit more organized and easier to work with. I'll try and talk as much information as I can about 10 gauge. Shortening we'll also go over shortening receiver wires. Yeah, right. Jeremy, we're just going over the kind of what's going to be happening. We haven't really started yet. Shortening the RX wire, the receiver wires. So I'll go over that. That one's a little bit simpler. And then I'm gonna go over why I use this for wiring. So there's that part. And we'll do wire placement for the ESC and the servo, and then also sensor wire placement as well. So instead of just doing soldering, we're going to go over an entire wiring of a 2.0 buggy. And then I'll put in notes about 4 buggies and stuff that we can kind of improve there. But it is almost 12:30, so we're going to give it a little bit more time. If you guys have any questions right now, go ahead and ask away, and I'll try and answer them as much as I can. If I sound a little funny, it's mainly because I'm just getting over a cold. Getting better, just lingers a little bit longer than I wanted it to. Yep, it's gonna be. We're gonna explain it as best as we can. There's always some things that I feel like I'm gonna miss, but if you guys have any questions or catch anything that I am missing, or if you have any questions on something I didn't touch on, just let me know and I will add it to it. We're gonna be here for a bit, so make sure everyone has a good understanding of soldering, wiring up a car, the do's and don'ts. just make it as useful as possible. So as far as a travel soldering iron, I think probably one of the better options is maybe like the one up style one where it has like the but I would use it with the box. I think there's one that has like a box. I think my buddy Justin had it. But I don't really travel with a soldering iron usually. I usually just keep the one at home, and I try to find, if I really need one, I'll probably try and find one at the track. Usually the hobby shop has one, or someone has one laying around that can get the job done. But the small portable one's been pretty solid. I used the one up one in the past, and that one was pretty good. I wouldn't recommend unsoldering wires from a speed control, rewiring a speed control with it. But if you have to fix something like a motor wire or a battery wire, that'll do it. There'll be plenty for it. All right, so it's 12:30. We got a few people in here now. So what I wanted to go over first is, since I didn't get to do it on Instagram last week because I was kind of sick, I didn't really feel like up to anything. So we'll go over the JBRL finals. Myself, I was kind of out of the points, didn't really do much. So I was out there just driving, having fun. A little frustrating in the B main when I had a couple issues, but it is what it is. But my main focus was making sure that Justin Myerson was able to take home the win for intermediate buggy, and he actually ended up doing that. The trophy's in the back right there, taking photos of it. And then we have his HB Racing D819 RS. This car has been dialed. This car has been super solid all year. Honestly, I've watched him improve tremendously using this car. I would definitely recommend it if you're going into just getting into RC or Nitro for the first time. Super simple to work on. There are a couple of things that are that need updating, I'd say. They don't have the quick change gearboxes yet, but that's minimal stuff. And then if you notice, I mean, it's hard to see in the videos, but whenever we do longer mains or we prep for a main event, we actually shugu every single nut on the car. And we actually shugu, this time around, we shugu'd the wing. So nothing can come loose. Everything's Loctited to start with, but then we do an added shugu layer so that everything is sealed and there's really no reason for anything to back out, fall apart, or just some bad luck. We kind of try and cover all the bases before we go to the race, before into the main, so we can minimize any problems that might happen. But yeah, Justin got it done. He ended up taking the overall championship for JBRL this year in the intermediate class. He was actually doing really good in Truggy until he had a little bit of a mistake, and then actually he caught back up to Frankie, but just couldn't make the pass on him. So he was right there with him, and I'm actually really proud of him because before this year he was maybe mid-level intermediate driver, and now he's won the intermediate buggy championship, and he's also battled the fastest guy. I mean, Frankie's now running pro classes, and he was right there with him the whole time. It was a smaller track, so it was a little bit different, but still pretty impressive for him to come so far in so short time. We're going to go on to the Holiday Brawl. Been racing that. There were 3 rounds in. Unfortunately, this is going to be one of the last Holiday Brawls because OCRC is closing at the end of the year due to stuff that they can't control. But we're trying to make the best of it, trying to get the biggest turnouts and enjoy a track that's super awesome and shouldn't be closing. So we're just enjoying the Holiday Brawl every Sunday, doing some racing on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then just hanging out during the week. But so far, the Holiday Brawl's been going really well. I haven't raced anything. Actually, Caitlin's been running 4-wheel drive buggy, and then our friend Christy's been in the 2-wheel drive buggy class, and I've been running e-buggy, mainly just testing out some of our 3D printed parts that we're working on. So starting with a couple things, and obviously I know there's a lot of carbon options that can fulfill these, but try to make a little bit of a cheaper option that does just as good. We have a front wing for the e-buggy for the 8X. We also have a wing button over here. Wing 3D printed with actually aluminum countersunk washers, so it is super durable. Lasts plenty, just as much as a carbon one. But only costs like half the price. Or what we're going to start doing is we're going to start offering more in the package for a little bit more. You can also see all that on wbfactoryracing.com. The other thing that we have going on, and this has kind of been going on for a while now, but I want to make sure it's 100% ready before I go put it out there. But it's been working really well so far. And this is the servo mount ESC combo with the receiver box. You could do this whole setup with the stock receiver box, but you don't have protection to your receiver. You can just cut the existing one flat and then put your receiver in the front and your speed control right behind it. And everything will work the same way that I have it here, but your receiver is now out in the open. So I decided to make that so that we can cover that. The benefit from this is actually, I'd say it's more on the high grip surfaces. Anytime you're running a clay tire or like an S3 tire, you'd be really good with this. What it does is it balances the car a bit more. It gets the weight more of the nose and keeps the rear a little, it makes the rear a little bit lighter. So it's in a loose surface, it's not going to be as good. It'll still be beneficial to the car, but it won't be as good as it is on high grip. So what I've noticed, the biggest thing is that the car doesn't want to rotate as fast. Like it gets into the corner really well, but when you get it out of it, it doesn't want to keep rotating. It holds. We just see the bench. What camera are we talking to? We just see the bench. I mean, I'm not quite sure. But basically, it gets rid of the pendulum effect. I think there was a little bit too much weight on the rear of the car. And so if I look at this camera, it's better. Yeah, so basically it gets rid of the pendulum effect. So when you go into a corner, the rear doesn't want to continue to slide. It goes in the corner, bites, and accelerates out. So in loose grip sections, you may lose a little bit of grip, but at the same time, most tracks are higher grip. You can run S3 style tires. Right now, I've been racing it indoors at OCRC. I raced it at Hot Rod, and it was really good, but it did lack a little bit of grip. I was able to make some setup changes and get it to where it works really well, but still, I think it needs a little bit more work on the loose tracks. But for most tracks where they're high grip and a little bit faster, this is definitely a big improvement to the car from running the speed control in the back here. I'm going to take a break from that real quick and answer some questions. I see you as a Heiko. We answered that one. Can you also talk about staggering splices and why it's important to stagger splices? Not exactly sure what you're talking about there. Actually just started to shoe glue my sensor wires at the plug. That's also a good idea. Just a little bit just to be safe. Much respect, man. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. I would just keep my distance from the idiot. Definitely doing that. I want nothing really to do with that. So we're going to talk about him as limited as we can. Do the front wings work with other cars? I'm currently designing one that's going to be more universal. This one is specific because the holes are already into it. But with the 3D printed stuff, it's a little bit thicker on the bottoms for a little bit more durability. So I put the holes in it so you don't have to drill the holes in there. So we're gonna have an HB one. It's gonna be an RC8 one. We'll do one for the Kyosho car. Basically, since it's 3D printed, we can pretty much do whatever ones we need to. There isn't really a limit. We don't have to order 1,000 of them and get stuck with 1,000 of them. So 3D printed, I'm more available to just design something and then put it up to the site, and if people want it, we can print it. So there really isn't any limitations. We can make whatever you want. RC Kevin, what's going on? How are you? Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate that. All right. So yeah, that's enough about this car. If anybody has any more questions, we can go back to it. But let's see, we're moving forward on this. We got dirt chunks. Coming over 3D printed stuff. So we have the new servos. These have been around for a bit now, and so far they've been dialed. I've been running in my 2-wheel and my 8-scale car. We actually have a driver coming on that's going to be running our stuff for all 22. Pretty big name driver, so it's going to be pretty interesting to announce that, but we have to wait a little bit later into the year. Servos have been solid though, like super smooth. Honestly, I think they look pretty rad. I'm a little biased, but super smooth, super durable. And I drive my stuff hard. Usually I'm not the cleanest of drivers, so I make mistakes. I bounce off pipes, and nothing's really wrong. Like I haven't broken anything. And Nitro Pro's stuff has been so good. Like I've been following them for a little bit, and that's why I decided to work with them. Drew is a very cool guy. I definitely like talking to him. Actually, I have to thank the No Name RC podcast for getting me hooked up with Drew. If it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't know Drew too well. So that was pretty rad. And then we're gonna go on to our sponsorship deal. So we will be offering sponsorships for this year, or for this coming year, 2022. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, but just haven't really. The website wasn't really set up to where it'd be easy. I'd have to have everybody email me their orders, and I don't want to make it a mess. I don't want to make mistakes. I want to make it as easy as possible. So I dug around. I was able to make the website a little bit better, and allow discounts to certain levels of drivers. So we're going to have a couple of levels. And then the cool thing about our sponsorships is that you may be getting a smaller discount than what a bigger company would do. But what we're going to start doing, this is going to be kind of introduced in December, is an affiliate program. So basically the affiliate program allows you to earn money based on how well you promote your code on the social media and in person. So the better that more people that use your code, the more money you're going to make. And it's not going to be crazy. It's not going to be a lot, but it is a way for you to earn money while promoting a brand instead of just product at a discount. I want to try and give something a little bit more. That way we make sure that we're taking care of the people that take care of us. So basically, the better you do for us, the better we'll be able to provide for you. That's kind of what we have going on for next year. I've gotten a couple emails regarding sponsorships and everything. So we're going to get dialed in with that. I'm going to start emailing everybody back probably next week after I go through everyone. So that's what we're going to be doing there. No questions there. Sorry for the sniffles. It's been rough the last couple weeks. And then carpet tracks. We've been seeing pretty cool carpet tracks popping up around the world. I hope someone comes out with something for Southern California. I think that's going to be the way that we go if we have any more 10-scale tracks. I know that Paris just released that the Dirt at Paris released that they're going to be using Brian Wright's carpet track there. It's going to be like, I don't know if it's going to be permanent, but I know it's going to be set up for some weekends to race at. So that's really cool. With OC closing, I would hope somebody can build up a carpet track in Southern California, in the Orange County area. I think that'd be really cool. Unfortunately, like I like dirt, 10-scale dirt, but at the same time, running a dirt track is a lot. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of work to change tracks. But if you can get the building and you can get set up, carpet is so much cleaner. It's just, I feel like that's the way that 10-scale is going. Most of the cars now are built for these high grip surfaces. So it just makes more sense to go ahead and start running carpet as far as 10-scale stuff goes. If anybody has any opinions on that, I'd be down to talk about those for a little bit. But if not, we're going to jump into the wiring here in a second. But we'll check some messages real quick. What do we got here? Nothing so far. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into the wiring. We're going to start with, I have a Hobby Wing speed control here. we're going to fix it a little bit. We're going to make sure that it's ready to go. We got some positive and negative wires that were unsoldered. I don't know why I took those off. Can't remember. I'm going to put a new capacitor or rewire the capacitor, show you guys how to do that. We're going to go through the end here. We're going to shorten this wire down so it's fit for a two-wheel. And then we're just going to go through and just explain what it takes. So soldering iron, the solder, the different tools used to hold everything, and the best way to get to everything and how to clean it. So first we'll start off with what we're going to be using. So a lot of the questions I get are from what solder. Oh, let me shine this light. I'll work with the lights soon so we can kind of get everything. But here's what I'm using. So it's a 60-40 rosin core blend. It's made by, I think it's Kester. Yeah. So that's the brand right there. If I can get in there. There's the brand, all the information. I use the thicker stuff. So I use like a 1.5 millimeter diameter solder. To me, it just seems to be able to cover the wire quicker. So you don't have to use you don't have to leave the iron on there as long. Because if you leave the iron on too long, your wires can get crispy, and then they don't bend and aren't as flexible. And then you have like those creases in your wire, and it doesn't really hurt anything, but it doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing. So next, can't really move it, but we're using the Heiko, I believe it's the 888XD soldering iron. It's the yellow and blue one. One thing that I did notice when I first got this one was that you have to recalibrate it even right out of the box. When I first pulled it out and started using it, it would barely unsolder a motor wire, like just from the motor. And then I looked on YouTube, and the guy was saying that you need to recalibrate it. Sometimes they're not set up right, or they're just not done, or there's an update that you need to do. So there's a pretty quick, I could put the link, I can share the link on Facebook if you guys need that video in order to make yours work better. I also run mine for most wires. I run it at 899. So basically 900 degrees Fahrenheit. That seems to be doing it the best. I'm actually going to have to leave you guys for a second because I need to get my sponge. But yeah, 900 degrees is where you want it to run at. That seems to be the best and the strongest. And then it makes things happen a lot faster, so you're not leaving the iron on the wire for so long. Oops. All right. One 10 scale should be dirt. Carpet is for touring cars. No, and I agreed with that for the longest time, but the way that all the cars are being designed now, it's almost like carpet tracks are the only ones that exist. But I mean, everybody has their own kind of deal, and I think if 10 scale went carpet, 8 scale should always be dirt, and it should be rough dirt. It should be a track that changes, and it shouldn't be a sealed or glued track. It needs to get rough, like how Paris gets. Thunder Alley gets that way, and stuff like that. But yeah, I get it. I know, back and forth with the dirt versus carpet for 10 scale. All right, so went over the soldering iron a little bit with the calibration that you might have to do. So if your Heiko 888XD isn't working as well as you think it should, I would recommend trying that because that should fix everything. That fixed everything for me. And now we're going to get into tools. There's a bunch of different versions of this. This is like the old one. I drilled the hole in that to drill pistons. But this is the jigs up. So basically it's a soldering jig. It holds your bullets, holds all your connectors. I use it for pretty much everything now. This is like the most simple tool, but it helps you the most. And it makes everything clean because some people have used pliers with rubber bands around them. And what happens with that is that you put a bullet in here and then it rocks back and forth this way. So it doesn't actually doesn't really help you because now you're chasing a bullet left to right still. It's not holding it solid. With these holes, you can just put it directly into bullet under there and it'll hold it for you. Don't have to worry about it. If you got Dean's plugs, XT60s, you can fit them in here. This is obviously an older one. I believe they have a couple now that are carbon fiber or even larger than this. So I'd recommend getting one of those. And this is what we use for speed controls. This is, I think, like $12 at Harbor Freight. This thing, it's got plastic jaws, so it doesn't scratch anything. And it holds the speed control whichever way you want. You can rotate it this way. You can rotate it. You can spin it around. So this is a really cool tool for very cheap that will actually help you a lot. And now we have suspension clean. So whenever you see something get posted, like the photo that I used for this video, the suspension clean is actually what makes it shiny. So you get the solder there in general. You get the nice ball there after everything's solid. And you're not really adding a ton of solder to make the ball. You're just adding enough to get that little ball there. And then usually afterwards, it's already shiny from that. But what's going to happen is you're going to have the flux and the extra little pop that come off the soldering iron when you're soldering. Those get all stuck around there. And this stuff right here removes it easily. It's basically like a contact cleaner, but it's a little bit softer. So it's not as crazy on the wire or plastics. It's a little bit better to use than contact cleaner. And then you always want to use a clean rag. So a dirty rag, it'll still leave like kind of the residue, but a fresh clean one will clean it up real nice. So we'll start with this. So what we're going to do first, we're just going to remove all the wires that are left on here. We're going to remove the capacitor and make sure that everything is cleaned up before we start soldering everything new on there. So first we'll get the jig or the vise. So I always clamp it by the fan or the heat sink, whichever one you want to do. If you do this, it kind of holds it. If you can do it this way. You can do it kind of where it's on the back side, but then it kind of rocks a little bit because the plastic will flex. So square on the end of there, the whole jaw is biting onto the heat sink and it won't slide anywhere. It won't slide anywhere. You tighten it down pretty good. It'll flex a little bit, but you want to make sure it's not going to move anywhere. So the first thing that I do, and this is what I do for every speed control, whether it's an old one or a fresh one. If it has these colored guides on here, if you don't need them, most of the time you don't need them. But if you do need them, don't cut them off. I never run them, but I just use the letters on the bottom of the speed control, not the colors. So what I do is I cut these off. Slide here, slide there, and then you can just kind of pull them. If you can see this, let me know. Just want to make sure that everyone's kind of getting the same idea. But I'll do a close-up with the speed control once these are all pulled off. All right. So there it is. All those are pulled off. And now all we're going to do, take our soldering iron, bring it closer a little bit, and then take a little bit of solder to get the iron a little bit hotter. Ready to go. And all you gotta do is just touch here, hold, and then get it hot. And it should come right off. Like that. And then just do the same thing. You want to get, because like usually factory solder, I don't know exactly how they do it, but it seems to be really thick and hard to pull off. So you just want to, this might take a little bit longer than what's going to happen when we start putting wires back on. So I like to rock the wire back and forth just ever so slightly, and then it frees it up a little bit and it comes right off. Redo the solder on the iron. All right. And then the same thing, just rock it back and forth. Comes right off. All right. So now we're here. We've got all of those wires off. Now we're going to pop the capacitor wires off. This one was already done. So this was actually soldered to the bottom already, which is what we're going to do. Usually they come soldered with a bunch of extra wire on the top half, right behind the positive and negative power wires. So same thing with how we did these wires, you would do with those. That's same idea. So we can actually do that here. I like to move this so it's straight up and down. And then to get over, it's actually right about kind of where you're facing straight at it. Same idea. Just get the iron, a little bit more solder on there, hold the wire on there, pop it off. And then the next one on there, pop it off. Super easy. Now, the next thing I want to talk about real quick is these Hobbywing non-polarity capacitors. These things are actually pretty dialed, mainly because I have a little bit of OCD when it comes to wires. That's kind of why I started doing this. But it doesn't matter which way you solder it onto your positive and negative. So what you can do is keep your wires in line and not have them cross anywhere. I don't know why, but it bothers me so much when my wires have to cross, especially like speed control wires when they go from when the battery is switched from the speed control and the wires have to cross. They don't just go in a perfect arc together. So that's what I like about these. It gets rid of one of the cross setups in the wires. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to jump onto cleaning up all the current solder that's on here. And the easiest way to do this, just got to be careful and just know exactly what you're doing, is to take the soldering iron out of the vise. And then you're going to go, try to back a little bit so you guys can see this. Basically the trash can underneath here. And what I do is I take each one, I hold the iron on here for on each tab for a second till it gets back into a liquid form, and then just flick it into the trash can. So like I said, this is something you want to be careful with because you are flicking hot solder. So hold it on there for a second, flick it. Hold it on there for a second, flick it. Hold it on there for a second, flick it. Now, you don't want to hold on there for too long because what can happen is you can loosen up the tab and then you throw it in the trash can. I've done it a lot of times. I've had to chase these tabs in the trash can as they melt through everything. So be extra careful when you're doing this. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, we offer this service. We can take care of it for you. But this is how we do it here. So you just hold on there for a second, get it liquid, flick it into the trash can. Same with the last one. All right. So this is just the top half, and this is just getting all the solder removed. So we can kind of get an idea, so we can get a clear view. I mean, you can't really see it because it's not focusing, but you can see in this side that there's no real solder bubbles. It's just the tabs. So maybe we screw back a little bit. But yeah, tabs are all clean, minimal solder on there. And now we're going to clean up the bottom. This one, what I do with this is I actually add solder to it and then make the bubbles round again. So we'll start with that. So when you're trying to make bubbles, make these nice round silver bubbles, you want to make sure that the wire is solid first. So I actually solder to where it doesn't look right or doesn't look good at first. And then it's like putting an extra tiny bit of coating on it to kind of seal everything around so you don't see any of the wires in there anymore. So with this, you just hold the solder at the bubble and you just tap it. Okay. So here's what it looks like right after it's soldered. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get this as close and as clear, but you can kind of see now there's not really any chunks. There's smooth, round bubbles there. All right. So then we take the suspension clean. And all it's going to do is just remove all the extra, I guess it's, I don't know, whatever kind of comes off when you solder. And you'll notice that what it's doing is it actually just cleans everything and gets a lot of it off of there. It's a little bit harder on the bottom because it all kind of builds up down there. But you'll be able to tell that it's a lot cleaner. And then you go there. And that's where those shiny bubbles come from. So the main thing is once you get the actual wire or part soldered on, all you do is you want to fill in. So like, see if we can get, well, we'll go over it when we get onto the wires on the top. So for the wires on the top, the way that I have the speed control laid out, is just lay it down like this. So it should be parallel to your desk. So the wires will just lay straight off of here. So when we cut new wires, you're going to lay like that. For most speed controls, I prefer, as far as 10 scale goes, as far as 10 scale like off-road or carpet or even touring car, 13 gauge wire is going to be plenty. You won't need to run anything else. And I use TQ wire. I feel like it's the most flexible. It's the cleanest wire, I think. This stuff is really good. I've been using it on all the builds that I've done, unless it's requested to use 12 gauge. But they also offer 12 gauge. They also offer 10 gauge. 12 gauge is what I generally use for 8 scale. A little bit more current flowing through the speed control in the battery. So you want to use a bit more of a larger wire in order to keep the heat down. Because basically, I did this. I said this is what I explained to a guy before this video. You gotta think of it as like a highway. So if you have a 2-lane highway and you got a ton of cars trying to go through there, it's gonna get backed up really fast, and it's not gonna be as efficient. But if you have like a 3, 4, 5 or so lane highway and you have the same amount of cars, it's gonna flow a lot faster. It's gonna get to where it needs a lot quicker, and it's not gonna get as hot. So you're not creating a bottleneck between the battery to the speed control or the speed control to the motor. So for most 10 scale cars, you don't need to worry about that too much because it's not drawing. You're only running a 2-cell battery, and you're not really worrying about those types of things. When you start getting to 8 scale, when you're on a 4S battery and you have a lot more power and there's grip, and if you're outdoors and it gets hot, so you want to keep temperatures down, you want to go up to at least 12 gauge. I know some people run 10 gauge, but 12 gauge is plenty for 8 scale. As far as drag cars go, that's a lot of amp draw in a couple seconds. So I know people run 10 gauge for the battery wires and some are running 10 gauge for the motor wires. That's how I would probably recommend doing it. Just because you want the fastest flow, you want to keep things cool, you want things running efficiently. That's the best way that I would say is the way you want to do that. And then also Gen's Ace batteries come with 8 mil battery plugs. It's kind of a similar idea to the bottleneck, but when you already have a 5 mil plug, I feel like that's okay already. Definitely a little better than 4 mil, but 8 mil should, again, just gonna make it more efficient. It's gonna make it better. Power delivery should just make everything run more efficient. That's kind of the goal, because efficiency is usually equals more speed in most cases. So yeah, 13 gauge for 10 scale, 12 gauge for 8 scale, and for drag cars, 10 gauge. Those are kind of what I would stick with. As far as bashers go, like when you're running like a 6S Arma Creighton with huge motor and all that stuff, I would just go straight to 10 gauge. Even though it's an 8 scale car, you're running more power than what you would normally run in a race 8 scale car. So just go straight to the 10 gauge, run that if your speed control doesn't already have it. Most basher RTR speed controls already have that kind of stuff. Some have 8 gauge even. But if you're rewiring a speed control, I would at least go back to what they're running, if not, and go to the next size up. All right, so now we're gonna go back to wiring the speed control. So generally, what I would do when I'm wiring a 2-wheel, just kind of do a quick layer of where it's gonna be. So I always hold the speed controls about here, and motors, the farthest one is about there. So you kind of get a quick little measurement to kind of make things. And then just to be safe, just give it like another couple, like 10 mil or quarter of an inch, half inch. I use, let's see, we got some scissors right here. So we have some scissors. Could use snips, scissors. I like scissors just because it's a little bit sharper and cuts a little bit quicker. But if you have a nice pair of body scissors, get another pair of scissors. Use a little duller set because you don't want to ruin your body ones. The wires will eventually dull out your scissors. So I have wires that are specific that I use to cut wire. And then you want to make sure you have your 3 power wires. I just cut them all the same length once I get that one length that I want. And I always use the furthest distance, obviously, because you want to make sure that if your C wire is the longest wire, your A wire is going to have plenty. So that's nothing you got to worry about. For most 10 scale cars, the battery leads are going to be shorter. So you can cut them shorter if you want to save wire. If you don't, I would just cut all of yours to the same length. That's what I do here. And it's a little bit wasteful, but I mean, it's a couple cents, so it's not too bad. So just cut all these different lengths. And now you have your 5 wires here that you're going to solder onto your speed control. For 4-wheel drive buggies, obviously you're going to need to use a little bit more length than power wires because generally, as far as like a TLR, an X-Ray, the AE car, all those cars, the motors are directly behind the speed controls, and then your battery is on the other side of the car, but you have to go around the center diff. TLR already has it to where they have a wire clip that mounts to the center diff, and your 2 power wires clamp to that, go around the spur gear so that the wire is clear, and then into your batteries. If you don't have that, we have our own little wire clip that we made for the AE car, but it should fit most cars. So if you need something like that, check out WB Factory Racing. We have them in stock right now, and we can get them shipped out to you, and you can organize your wires that way. Basically, it'll just run the wires around the center diff and into the battery, and then you don't have to worry about the wires getting chewed up by your spur gear. All right, so for each wire, what I like to do is just get maybe between like 2 or 3 millimeters. You don't need to cut off much of the insulation. You just want to strip it back a little bit. And I'm used to using scissors. Some people use an X-Acto knife. Some people use wire strippers. But all you need is a very little bit amount. You want to keep as much of the wire insulated as you can, because you don't want wires touching. But you also only need to cover a very small section on the tab. So what I do, just kind of check it, make sure that's the right one, and it should fit in there perfect. The insulation should touch the tab, and that's when you know that it's going to be in the right spot. So then we'll go ahead and do all of these. Just do them all the same, get them all pre-cut and ready to go. I like to do things, instead of doing one at a time, just get them all prepped and ready to go so we don't have to change tools back and forth. So you're not going scissors, soldering iron, tinning it, scissors, soldering, tinning it. Just do everything at once. Move that out of the way. Kind of clean up a little bit. Try to keep your bench as organized as possible. I know it gets hard. I know I've wrenched on cars before, and before you know it, everything is everywhere. Throw your old wires away. And then what I do, put the speed control over here for right now. And then we're going to use this. We can't really move the camera. But as far as tinning goes, same thing. Put solder on the iron, and then just hold the iron to the bottom. Kind of let it sit there for a second, and then start adding solder to the top. That way, the solder at the bottom and the solder at the top will meet, and it'll run all the way through the wire, and you'll have a solid tinned wire at the end there. So I hang it off the edge of this. So basically it'll sit like that. And then I just bring the iron into the bottom and the solder on the top. Solder on the bottom. And then you just hold it there, start touching it, get it hot. And once you have a nice solid tin all the way through, all good to go. Good there. Eventually, when I get better at these video things, we'll have more official cameras. We'll be able to do close-ups, just be a little bit more dialed. Right now, we're kind of just working on what we've got at the hand right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do all these next few wires. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Should be doing this in a well-ventilated area. Usually mine is, but I had to keep the blinds closed today so that the sun's not blowing through. So well-ventilated area, guys. So remember, I'll go over it one more time before I finish this wire. Clean the tip off a little bit, make sure it's fresh solder. Solder on the bottom. Touch the bottom of the wire and add solder to the top. And it'll run directly through the wire. Make sure you have a solid tin all the way through. And then you end up with a nice silver finish. Try and get it to where it's clear. Yeah, struggles here. But yeah, it's basically solid all the way through. And then it's going to be easier to solder back to the speed control once we get to that point. All right, so back to the speed control. Since we flicked all the solder off the tabs, or most of the solder, you want to add just a drop of solder so that it has something, so the wire has something to connect to. So best way to do it is start from the right. I mean, I guess it also depends on what, if you're left-handed or right-handed, but start on the farthest side, the opposite side of the iron. So you're not dragging the iron across more wires. You're just dragging the iron to a new spot all the way across. So first one, for me, left-handed, we're going to do the C wire first. And just get a little bit of solder in there. Sorry about that. Now, you want to lay the wire in there first. So you can see this. Can't really see that here. How about there? Now, yeah, like I said, we'll get better cameras and get everything handled a bit better. But lay the wire on the tab, and all you have to do, since everything's fresh solder, you just heat it up, and it drops right in. So you can see this here. Let's see if we can get it to work. Solid bond, but it doesn't actually have the bubble on it just yet. It's just, you see just the wire attached to there, but it's solid all the way into the pin, so it doesn't have to, so it's going to be strong there. So the way to make it nice and shiny and make it look good is all you do is the same thing that we did at the bottom of the circuit board on the speed control, is just hold the solder on the tab and just touch. Do it a couple times. And then you get a nice, I wish I could have a better camera, but you get a nice, solid little silver solder bubble right there. It's hard to see, I know, I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, it's basically just a quick, once you get the wire laid in there first, it's just a quick tap, 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 and then it fills in, and with every tap, it fills in a little bit more. And you can kind of go until you're until you like what you see. You could go just a little bit covering the wires, maybe a little bit more, but you want to keep the solder to a minimum to where it just has a nice solid finish. You don't want to have, to me, you don't want to see the wires poking through. You're not really going to see the actual wire, but you're going to see kind of like you'll see the wires through the solder. And you'll kind of see that. So I like to get all that covered. And there's one solid bubble, so it looks nice and finished. So then we'll go to the next one. Same idea. Just give it a touch of solder there so that it has something to bond to. And then we'll lay this wire in and just get it nice in there. You'll feel it kind of sink in when you get it. And then it'll actually sink into the solder, and that's what's going to be the strong bond. And then from here, let's see, we'll straighten this one out. Just a touch, got a little off. All right. Now from here, you just hit that nice little tap. It's going to create a little bit of a bubble, and then it's going to. Usually, what happens is the bubble starts in a small section of it, and then you keep tapping it, and it expands. So you don't want to go too far because it could expand to the other wire, and that's a pain in the butt. It's fixable, but it's a pain in the butt. So with this, you just keep going and want to dry and clean, just until it's a nice, solid, shiny bubble. And all right. So I want to go ahead and do the next three. Same idea. You're just going to keep adding a little touch of solder just so that it just has something to bond to. Otherwise, if you don't do the solder before, what's going to happen is it's going to take longer to heat up because you're going to have to get this little dry patch of solder that's in here, and it's going to continue. You're just going to hold it on there for longer, and then you're not going to get a good bond, and that's what's going to create a cold solder joint, and then eventually, in the right conditions, it can pop off, and then you lose power. So there's a nice little touch. Make sure it's a little bit shiny. You have the wire on top. And then just push, just lightly push. No need to put pressure. It'll do its own job. And then it's soldered in. And then we go back. And we just give it a nice little coat. Top and bottom. Just get to make sure it's solid all the way through. Again, not applying too much to where it joins another solder, another post, because that's really bad. All right. Now we'll go to the next one. So just make sure it fits. Drop a solder here. Might be a little bit too much, but should be okay. And then we'll just hold it on top of the wire. It'll sink in. And we're bonded. And then just add a couple drops of solder to create the bubble. Make sure it goes all the way top to bottom. Make sure it's nice and solid. We'll make sure it's nice and clean. This is what's going to give it that look that I post all the time, where you see the shiny bubbles. All right, and then we've got the last wire. So same thing. I know I'm being repetitive, but just in case people are coming and going, I just want to make sure it's covered for everybody. Nice little bit of solder in there. Lay it on top. Trying to get this one. I'll get better at this. Just lay it on top. Hold the iron down. It'll push. It'll bond together. It'll drop in there for you. And then from there, add a couple little solder to bubble it up. Should make this nice shiny silver section. And there you go. Super simple. Obviously, these are the types of things that take a bit of practice and getting used to. So here is where we sit now. Man, I wish I could just get better. Oh, maybe that's better. So they're round bubbles. Nothing's touching, but there's a little bit of residue left around the wires and the board. This won't affect anything. I just like to clean everything up to make sure everything's nice and clean. So when we get back to the suspension clean, you can also get this at wbfactoryracing.com, as well as the SC1 and the Bio Wash. Sorry, I was jumping a little bit around, but SC1 makes everything super shiny. It's a silicone spray. It also works really well for if you're going out before a track is getting watered. Like for the JBRL, they water every other race, and then the next round they'll water the evens, then they'll water the odds. So if you get a wet track, it's usually pretty muddy for the first couple laps. But if you use SC1, just coat all your suspension, your arms, the sides of the body and then throw your car out there, the SC1 will actually help the dirt not stick. So it actually, we use that to shine our stuff up, make it nice and clean. We also use it as a tool to keep mud off the bodies, keep weight down on the car. Because obviously when you add mud, car gets weighed down, and that's a big problem. Yes, yeah, the live video is going to be uploaded to the channel. So it'll be up for everybody to share, watch as many times as you'd like. So you'll be able to replay it and watch any section that you need to. But yeah, SC1 BioWash cleans everything really good. I'm also using this stuff here now. It's their degreaser. It's very simple or similar to a Simple Green. It just doesn't have ammonia in it, so it's actually really good. It's really good for cleaning stuff without really doing any damage. I know the Simple Green kind of leaves a film on stuff after you clean with it. This stuff doesn't, and it makes it really nice. All right, so back to this. We're going to take our suspension clean. Nice little spray in the rag, and then just scrub it back and forth. Nice and easy. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get your super polished. I'll take photos of this later so you guys can see it, but it's super polished. The shine on it's a lot nicer. All the solder joints are super solid. And so one, you're getting a high quality solder job, as well as it's looking good. It's also looking good. Sorry, guys. All right. So now that we have the wires on, we're going to do the capacitor. And again, I almost did it backwards. I'm going to put it in this way so that you're getting a full bite with your vise and it's not slipping. It's not going to slide around on you. And then lift it back up to where it's kind of at an angle to where you're looking straight down at it. If you guys heard that, that's my dog. There's probably someone at the door. As far as these go, as far as putting the capacitor on, if you have an idea of where you're going to put it in the car, what I would do is tape it on the speed control where you think it's going to go. So in most cases, don't mind my receiver wire in this servo. Put it in the servo and haven't shortened the wire yet. In most cases, you're on a two-wheel drive buggy, your capacitor is going to go on the side in between the receiver. The only time that really wouldn't be a thing is if you run like a Futaba receiver, or if you have like the Sanwa, like their cheaper line of radio and receiver where they have a large receiver. That's the only time you wouldn't be able to do that because it won't fit. What you would do then is put your receiver here and then put your capacitor behind it. So that way it's a little bit more, you have to kind of take your time and kind of lay it out before you solder it up. But it's still the same as doing it here. So with this one, we're going to put it the same way as this right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to tape it to the speed control before we even start soldering, so we know what the lengths are that we need to work with. So start off, we're going to remove the janky wires that are on here. We're going to put fresh ones on there. So the first thing you do, remove the speed control from the vise, put it off to the side for a second, and now we're going to clamp our capacitor in here. All right. And then the same thing. So same thing as what we were doing earlier, removing the wires from the ESC. It's always, you're going to just do a quick dab on the iron so they get solder on the iron. And then just a quick hold and it should just pop right off. Like that. And then like that. And then what you want to do, rotate your vise to where it's in the upright position, so that basically the only reason that we do it this way is so the solder falls down. You don't want it to fall back. You want to hold it this way so it falls to the side, or this way so it falls to the side on the other one. You want gravity to just let them let the bubbles stay right where they're at. You just don't want to cross them up. So with this, just this one for we're working with small wires now, so small sections, so just a small little dab. And all you're gonna do is just hold it on there for a second, and then a second. Remove that. Maybe you got it. If you have a little bit of excess solder, don't put any solder on it, and then just touch it down. And now, let's see if we can get this. You got two flat little sections right there that you get to work with. So now we grab some wire. So usually capacitor wires are 18 gauge. I don't really get 18 gauge wire, so what I'll use is existing capacitors that I replace that we're going to throw away. So we just take, again, this is my preference. You could obviously you can use either wire with either color, or you can use both colors, like positive and negative. But since it's non-polarity, I like to use black because it looks a little bit cleaner. So we just cut that off, throw this off to the side. And now we have this little strip of wire that we're going to use to solder onto here. It's going to connect it to the ESC. So the first thing that I would do, there's two ways to do this. You can either cut it in half, because this should be plenty for both. You can cut it in half, or what you can do is you can tape the capacitor to the side of the speed control and add the length of wire that you need. It's a little bit more. You can save the wire a little bit more, but when you have this much, I mean, it's not going to be too much to save. So I'm just cut it in half. Now, this is kind of more into planning how you're going to wire your car versus just actually wiring it. So when I'm wiring a car and I don't exactly know how I'm going to lay it out, I like to just kind of think about how it's going to sit in here. And then so this is how it's going to sit. It's going to sit on the ESC plate here. And then you have to think, am I adding anything else? Is there going to be a fan wire? Is it going to clear the sensor wire? You want to make sure it's still easy enough to access all the wires you're going to need to get to in case something happens. So laying this out, if you run it low, and if you run it directly low and it goes straight across here, you're going to block your sensor wire. So if you run it to the bottom, what you want to end up doing is giving yourself a little bit of room by running the wires out and then over. The other option to do is to run the wires up and over and solder them across here, and then layer the wires. So the first one comes in, stops here, and your second one, your top wire, goes over the top and runs across the top of it and then solders there. So that's the way that I would do this one. That's the way we're going to do this one. And then what we would normally do, I don't think I have a fan wire to add, but you would solder your fan wire to the bottom here and run it, because that wire is a lot thinner. The fan wires are generally a lot thinner than the capacitor wires. So you want to do that. So you'll start with here, lay this one in, solder it to the outside of the tab. So it gives you that little bit of extra room to get your sensor wire in. Then run the wire here. And after you get that one, you solder the far one in first. Then you go to the second one that's shorter. And then solder that one. Then you can have it. This one can lay parallel with the board. And this one comes straight down. And then they both come down together. Yes. Oh, visitors. So let's start with that. We'll do the capacitor now, and I'll try and find a fan wire that I can add to it just so we can do it. Or if we can just find a solo bit of wire, we could do that. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to the capacitor. And since we're going to be soldering it to the top, so we're going to set it directly to the wires. We're going to lay these in a certain way. They're not going to just go straight out from the top. We're going to lay them sideways. So you're going to lay these sideways so that when you solder them on, you just bend them over and they're going to be perfectly aligned. So the first thing, we'll start with this wire. It's going to be the same exact thing that we did with the main wires. A little bit of solder on the iron to get to the bottom. And then we're just going to go iron at the bottom, solder on top, and we're going to tin the wire all the way through. And that's all. With the little wire, it takes us a little bit less time, less wire to go through. I never use the pre-soldered areas like that. The pre-soldered stuff, the solder's different. It's older. It doesn't make a big difference, but that wire is already crispy. Like, because usually these are a lot harder here. So I always cut that end off. Make sure that if there is an end, and then start with a fresh section of wire. And the other thing is you don't need as much wire as they cut out. So just cut your own end off and then tin your own end. So solder on the iron, hold at the bottom, solder on top, push through, and we're tinned. Any questions so far, guys? Okay, we're wrapped. Okay, so now you have your capacitor here, and your tab that you're going to solder to is going to face the side of the speed control here. So it's going to be facing this way. So we're going to solder the wires up. You don't want to go down, you want it to go up. And then from there, we'll add it. We'll tape we'll tape the capacitor to the speed control, and then we'll finish the soldering in the vise. So lay your first wire on. If you're soldering up this way, you want to lay this piece on first, and then after you get that done, you'll lay this piece second. So the top wire will go, which would become the bottom wire at the end. But the top wire, when you're soldering it onto the capacitor, is going to go second. So then all we're going to do, same idea, drop a solder on the iron, and then we're just going to hold this on here for a second. And just going to bite in there. Now, if you want to get real crazy, you can actually angle the wire in the direction that you want it to go. So instead of it going straight out, you could probably lean it in just a touch so it's already going the direction that you need it to. For this one, we'll just go ahead and leave it straight. Not a huge deal, kind of like a really huge OCD thing. But yeah, same idea. We're going to do the solder bubble on here. So you just, again, nice little tap. This one you have to work fast because it's a small wire. There's a lot, it's hanging off the end, so it's going to want to come off. So you can't hold the iron on there for more than maybe a second. So you're doing it really quick, or this will happen. Watch. And then you fall off, and then you get frustrated. So we'll just put it back on. There we go. And then all you're going to do is just quick taps. Just that's like that. And that's all it takes. All right. So we'll do the same thing with the second wire. Now, when you since we're laying the wire across an already soldered section, you need to really focus on how much you cut back, cut of the insulation you cut back, because you don't want the soldered area to touch the other end. Even though it's a non-polarity one, you still don't want them touching. That's still bad. So make sure that when you lay your wire in, that it's nowhere close, like the actual wire is nowhere close to touching the other end. So again, just a quick tap. All right, and then we're gonna lay that right there. It's gonna have, since you're laying it on top of a wire, it's gonna be at a bit of an angle, but when you solder everything together, it's gonna fix that. So then we do a quick bubble. All right. So now we have this. Again, man, I need a new camera. This is bad. Basically, two little solder bubbles. Both wires are on there tight. We're solid. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to move on to taping the capacitor to the speed control. This is what I use because there will be no gap between the speed control and the capacitor. You could use the regular double-sided tape, but I feel like this looks cleaner. Looks like it's just sticking to there for no reason. So I think that looks a little bit better. Super, super thin. Like it's paper, basically. And then what we do, you can even use your suspension clean to clean it. Clean both surfaces. So we're going to use this side, the hobby wing side. Just clean it up, make it all nice and clean. Make sure that we don't have any problems. Make sure it sticks really nice. Also on the speed control side that you're going to be clean, you want to be using, make sure that's all nice and clean. All right, so now you want to line this up. First off, I would definitely just kind of check it out and make sure that you have everything where you want it to be, because instead of having to really stick it down, you just know that you want the front. Me personally, I run the front of the capacitor, the front of the ESC in line, so they're flush. And then if it's the shorter one, it'll have a little bit more room back here, and you can run the wires a little bit differently. But with this one, it runs all the way front to back. So you'll be able to just directly go straight to the board and make it nice and clean, make nice little perfect length wires that follow each other. So we'll go ahead and tape it. Just cut along the top. Okay. Put that back up on top of there. And then this stuff is super thin. And actually, the paper comes off pretty easily usually. So we'll see. Might use the X-Acto. Just grab the paper end. It's hard when you got no nails, I guess. We need to get Caitlin in here with her giant nails. All right. So now line it up the way that you want it. Just do it slow. Make sure that you have it all nice and lined up the way you want it. Push down and hold it down for a couple seconds. Make sure that it gets a good bond. So there you go. Now you have a one-piece unit, and you're going to be able to solder it directly without having to worry about holding onto the capacitor or anything like that. Now, the way that we've been strapping the speed control into our clamp is by the heatsink or the fan. Now we're going to move on to using this section here. So what you're going to do, you're going to clamp the speed control from the capacitor all the way to the other side. When you do this, depending on also depending on what speed control you use, make sure that you're not pinching your wire, like your receiver wire here. Some speed controls, it comes out the middle of the side of the case. So just try and be a little bit proactive about that and figure out the best way to hold it. If you have to do it by the heatsink and stuff, you can still do it that way. I just like to do this because while you're soldering, it's keeping it pressed in and getting a little more pressure so that it gets a better adhesion. So this, I just saw a question from Brian. This tape is just Scotch, double-sided tape, Scotch tape. What is this? It's number 468, high performance adhesive. I've had this for a long time, so I'll look it up and see where I can get this. I gotta figure it out because I've had this for. I mean, this roll's almost gone. It was huge. I've had this for probably a couple years now, so I'll check it out. I'll let you guys know what tape that is, so you guys can use that as well. All right, so now we're gonna open our vise. Open it up to where this fits inside. And again, you want to make it so that it's holding the full end of the vise is what's holding the speed control in. It just makes it get a solid clamp on it, and then it's not rotating back and forth. Because if you do it the other way, like if we did it this way, so like this, it can rotate back and forth. It's not super secure because since it is plastic, it starts to bend in as the bolt tightens it down. So the top half never gets clamped as well. So if you use the whole top half of it, it gets a better clamp, and you don't have to worry about your speed control moving around on you. A lot stronger. Well, maybe not. But I do it this way anyways. And then we just angle it down so that we get a nice view of what we're working with. And then again, since we have the non-polarity capacitor, we're just going to lay the wire in how it goes here. So it doesn't matter which way. You don't have to cross them. You have to worry about which one's going negative, which one's positive. You just lay them down and you do your thing. So with this one, we're going to run the bottom wire on the capacitor to the positive or the negative, which is the first terminal. And then we're going to lay your top wire across the top of it onto the positive. So we'll start with, we'll move this wire out of the way. And we'll take this wire and lay it across. And you always want to give yourself a little bit of extra room, because if you go directly tight and you have to change something or something happens and you have to, maybe the wire got smashed, you want to be able to give yourself at least one more solder job before you rewire it. So back it up just a touch, but you still want it to be nice and clean. So don't go too far with it. Hold it over there. I usually just take a quick little snip at where it's at, and then also double check. Make sure we're going to have room to solder. And then we cut the whole wire off. All right. And then from here, you take your wire strippers, your X-Acto knife, your scissors, whatever you want to use. I like scissors. And then you do the same thing that we've been doing this whole time. So you just cut maybe 2 to 3 millimeters off. And then you have exposed wire. We're going to grab a soldering iron, get the soldering iron with solder on it. And then we're going to hold it at the bottom or in front and then to the side. So, but basically the same thing. Solder goes through the wire and you get a nice solid tin on it. And it only takes a couple seconds. You can double check if you want. So that's like that. And now what we're going to do, so this is the part where it kind of gets annoying. If you've done this a lot, your hands are usually pretty set up to the heat. So you can kind of lay it in there and hold it with your hand, because it's only going to be a couple seconds, but it is a smaller wire, so it's going to get hot really fast. So then you line it up to where you want it. I know you can't see this. I'm going to try and show you guys after, but this is where we're sitting. Let's see. So the wire is basically, it's not attached yet, but it's floating over where we're going to solder it to. And all you're going to do is hold it down with your finger, and this should only take a couple seconds to join. Then you just put your finger on top. If it is too hot and you don't want to burn your fingers, just take a pair of pliers and just hold it very lightly. You don't want to squish the wire. You just want a just to keep it in place until it dries. So then we're going to we'll push it down, and then we're going to grab a little bit. Oh yeah. Touch of solder here so it's fresh, nice and silver and clean. And then you just hold it down for a second. And then it attaches. Sometimes you can get a nice bubble in the first shot. Let's see. And then it's going to be nice and solid there. Like that. Kind of. So you get a nice solid bubble there. The wire's attached. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lay the second wire over the top of that and then run it to the positive. So you just fold it over. Make sure it's a little bit there. All right. And then we're going to measure where we want it to be cut at. Give it its little snip right about here. So you have a little bit of wiggle room. Double check it, make sure you're happy with it. I mean, you kind of cut enough off to where you don't really have to have a choice, but just double check it anyways. And then from here, we just strip it, take that off. And it's only a couple millimeters. You don't want to use too much. You only need, like, for soldering to these things, you only need like 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters max. The wire stripped. The smaller the section you can solder, the better it'll look, the cleaner it'll look, and the less solder you have to use, and the less crispy the wires will get. So again, we just go hold the iron on one end, silver and the solder through the other, and it's going to meet in the middle, and then you're going to have a solid tin all the way through the wire. You don't have to worry about anything being what people call a cold solder joint. And then from here, we're going to add it to our positive lead on the speed control. So you just hold it down. Like I said, you can use pliers, or if your fingers are all numb and burnt out like mine, you can just do the same thing just by holding it with your thumb. So touch it there, get it hot, and then from here, just a nice little tap. And we're soldered. This one didn't quite have the right bubble that we like. So what we're going to do is the same thing we did with all of our other solder joints, and just tap on top. Let it cool for a second. So if you do it too quick, so if you tap, this is another note. If you are doing the tap section to create your bubble and you do it too fast, eventually that heat will just stay in there and it'll pop off, even when you tap it really quick. So tap it for like half a second, and then give it like 3 seconds to cool a little bit, and then again, give it a little bit of time to cool. Otherwise, if you get to the point where like, all right, I think I just need one more tap and it'll be perfect, usually by that time it pops off, and then you have to start all over. So then here, just a nice little tap. And there we go. Same thing. Once you're finished, clean all the residue off with the suspension clean. And then you end up with a little bit over here. And then you end up with a nice shiny solder all the way through that's super durable, and it's not going to affect the performance by adding a little bit of solder. We've tested this. There's literally no difference in adding this much. And you're not adding a ton of solder. You're not like, it's not like you have a wire that's 13 gauge and you're adding like 7 layers of solder. You're just adding it to where the wire is completely covered with the solder. So you don't have any wire looking solder joints. So now we have the speed control all set and ready to go. Drop in the car. Like I said, we can do a fan. Let me see if I got something we could do. So I don't have a fan at the moment, but we have the other end of the wires that would go on a fan that I've cut off. So we can go ahead and solder that to there, and we'll show you how to do that. So then we go back to this. Put your speed control back in the vise. And this way you're going to want to hold it upside down because you're going to want to get to the bottom side of the ESC. So we're going to put it in the vise like this. Try and get that shine off of there. That's something I got to work on, is the shine from the light. So we're gonna be working on this section of the speed control now, not the bottom, not the top side. So we're going back to the bottom, and we're gonna add what would be our fan wire, our fan lead, to this part. So in a 2-wheel drive buggy, your positive lead or your negative lead, depending on your speed control, is going to be off center to the channel that's designed for your wires to go under the battery and then into here where your fan is going to be. So this wire that's farthest from the channel should be laid in horizontal, and then the other lead, which is more center line, should be soldered straight down. So this is going to allow the wires to stay close to the speed control, out of any harm's way, and go into the right route they're supposed to be, and then straight back, and then out where they need to go. So to do that, we need to know which way the speed control is going to be laying in there. So we take this out for a second. So our speed control is going to sit in a car like this. Your receiver is going to be right here on the side of it. So then that means this wire has to follow your capacitor wire back, and then it's going to drop down right here. So for this speed control, our positive wire is going to be the long wire. So we put this back in. Going backwards, but it's all right. Turn around. So our positive wire is going to be the long one, so we're going to start with the positive one. As you can see, this one's kind of been cut. This is kind of how you're going to end up with your cuts. One wire is going to be longer than the other because one's going to go sideways and then one's going to go in straight down. So when it started the speed control, it will actually be soldered this way. So we're going to start with our positive wire, and then I'm going to adjust this actually to where it's leaning down this way. And now I'm looking as if I was looking through the chassis at the bottom of the speed control. So we'll go ahead and now this wire is even thinner than our capacitor wire. So in some cases, you can actually just grab the insulation and just rip it off. Super simple. That way you don't cut through. I like to do it that way because you won't cut through the wire. If you accidentally cut through the wire, then you get an even weaker joint on a wire that's really, really small as it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back here to our block, and we're going to tin the wire there. Same thing, touch of solder on the wire, top. This is what happens almost instantly. As soon as you touch the soldering iron to the wire, it pretty much just lights it up and it's tinned and ready to go. So then we're going to lay this one. So this wire, the first one that we're doing, is going to lay perfectly parallel with the ESC board. And we're going to, like I said earlier, for fan wires, when you're soldering to the bottom, you want to solder them to the outer edge of the board. You don't want to go inside because it's going to block your sensor wire. So outer edge, and you can put that in here. So we just lay it on the edge between the board and the solder bubble that we have set already. And just again, it's small wire, so we're just going to quick tap. Done. So now our wire is laying across the board like that, only touching your one positive lead there. And now, kind of screwed up because I didn't cut this one down. So basically what you would do is you would measure that. Actually, we're just going to redo it. That was my mistake right there. Should have measured that. Okay. So we'll start with even wires. So now we're back to even. We'll grab our positive wire, strip it first. So you want to cut your first long wire to the length that it needs to be, and then you'll adjust your negative or the wire that's second to the length that it has to be once your first wire is soldered. So I'll go back and run it through again. Tin it here, get it prepped. And then we'll throw this on here. That's that. Get this back on. Okay. So when you don't re-tin your soldering iron before you solder, you get these little pointed cone things. Basically, the solder gets stuck to the iron, and when you pull away, it lifts up and it doesn't look as clean. So in order to get rid of those, you can just use the same solder bubble technique. Make sure the iron has been cleaned. Add your solder. Hold the wire to make it sure it's supported, and then just tap. Whoops, came off. So clean it, add the solder, and then we're just going to tap it on there. If it doesn't go away in the first couple times, just add a touch of solder. Again, really quick. Just a nice little bubble there. And then you're back to your smooth, nice little bubble that holds the wire on and doesn't look pointed. All right. So now, what our goal is when we have the speed control mounted in the car, this wire is going to come here, and then this wire is going to go straight down. So let's see if we can kind of get in here. So we have, see how that one kind of loops over? It kind of follows the speed control board and then comes down. Well, this one already is coming down because we're going to join it right here. So you basically want it to go like that. If you can see that, kind of. Let's see, like that. So second wire is going to be straight up and down. Your other wire is already leaning to where it's going to meet up with the other wire. If anybody has any questions about this, like I can go over it a little bit more clear. I know it's hard to see in the camera. We're pretty new to this whole deal. So yeah, if you need help or if you have any questions, you can either email us, DM us. We're here to help and make sure that you know what you're doing. Don't want to let anybody kind of guess on this. Just want to make sure that everyone has the right information to get going and doing this on their own. So line it up. The way I can start at the plug and then kind of run the wires parallel together. Gotta flip this wire because it's going to run underneath. So now we flip it over, run them together, and then we're going to hold it here, and then we're going to let the first wire run past the board and get an idea of where it needs to be. And then we'll hold it there. Cut this guy. You want to maybe go a little bit past where you're going to do with this one, just because you're going to need to tin it and you want it to be on there solid. So you want to give it a little bit extra room than what you generally would do with the other stuff that we've done. Same idea. Take it with your fingers, take a little section of it and just pull it off. Much easier to do that way, I think. And then you don't run the risk of accidentally cutting one of the wires off of the wire that we have there. Because, I mean, realistically, so small, there's probably like 4 or 5, I'd say maybe like 10 strands total. So it's really easy to overcut one and then now you're soldering only to 5 or 6. So then again, nice little tin on the iron before we even touch the wire, and then hold it there. Boom, done. And then all we do is you take this wire and bend it right at the very end, and then you just lay it in there. Hold it on there for a second. I didn't clean the iron. I didn't add the solder. So the fresh solder, it left a point. So now all we do is, so you might want to angle up a touch, move the other wire out of the way a little bit first, and then just a quick tap. Just make it clean again. Boom. Done. All right, then you can realign your wires the way that you'd like. And they are on there. Make sure if there's any little bit of solder drops left over that you kind of clean the chips out. Sometimes that might happen, so just make sure you pay attention to that. That one. Okay. All right. So this speed control now has a capacitor, fresh wires, and a fan wire, which isn't really a fan wire, but a fan wire attached. So all you got to do is mount the speed control into the car, and then hook everything up. Obviously, you can get to your sensor wires still. There's a little bit of room because we ran the thinner wires at the bottom and we ran the thicker wires at the top. So you have that clearance, and that's going to help you there. So we've gone over pretty much everything that has to do with soldering and speed control. Makes it pretty simple to do. Let's see. We also got over the tools. We went through the wire. Now we're going to go and we have a suspension clean, wire placement. Now we're going to go over shortening the wires on the RX, like on the receiver pack. So I could do it on the speed control as well. Actually, we're going to do that too, but I'm also going to do it on this, one of our new servos here. So it really depends on these types of connectors. There's 2 different connectors, and the pins that you can grab at your local electronics store. These pins here, I believe when I did the video for Associated, these are the pins that I had. I've been using these forever. Super cheap, obviously, $2, $3 for a pack of 100, I think. 100 or 200. I don't know. There's a lot of them in here. It's a pack of 100. So it'll last you a while. You can do that. And as long as you're using like I don't even know the name of it, but it's like the plugs that Hobbywing use. I think Futaba, Reedy, those types of plugs where you can see. It's gonna be hard to compare them. I'll post a photo on the Instagram that shows you the different types of plugs. So there's 2 different types of plugs. And if you redo the wires with those plugs, your stock plastic plug won't fit on it. It will not work. The other option that you can do, and this kit's sold on Amazon. And this is what we use to make receiver the servo extensions. So we make these ourselves when we need them, because a lot of times we use them for in place of a nitro switch, we just plug the battery straight in. So we have an extension come out, and you just plug the battery straight in. So this is the kit that we use. This could be received on Amazon. My brother actually found this whole kit. Let's see if I can get it. Get you the part number for that guy. But yeah, it's basically an Amazon. It's just a JST plug package. It gives you male and females. It gives you the pins for all of them. So this is actually what I use now. This is a pretty solid deal here because you get both brand new plugs and the pins. The other way, you get just pins. And if you're using like a Savok servo, Sanwa servos, they all use the other pin, and these won't work with their plastic plug. So let's see, we'll grab some of these new pins, and then we'll grab a new plug. And then the part that you're going to need to get, and this is the one, and then I really recommend getting one that's super high quality, because if you get the ProTech one or just a regular one, it doesn't actually get them on there good enough. Because there's a couple of the RX plug crimpers that they don't bite into the wire like how these ones do. So these actually send the tabs on the pin up and then into the wire. So even in the insulated part, it's making contact because they get dug into the wire. The other ones that I had, they were like they weren't a ratcheting style. They were just regular ones. All they did was they just wrapped around the wire. So it never dug in. And if you pull on them too much, it actually rips them out. We had a problem with that when we first started doing all the wire shortening. And then we quickly solved that problem by getting these. These are also on Amazon. I can also post a link for these. My bad, I haven't really been keeping track. So anything that people want to know, where to get something, just message me. I'll get it up there. We'll try and get everything up there on our own. But if we do forget some stuff, just let me know. I'll get it up there for you. But these ones actually send the tabs back into the wire, and they clamp on super tight. So moving on with this, we'll just cut off 3 of them. Again, using my wire cutting scissors, because these scissors, anytime you cut metal with scissors, they're going to get more dull and more messed up. So just pick 1 pair of scissors and just continue to use those. Actually, something that I didn't say, which I thought would be kind of self-explanatory, is that whenever you're cutting wires, if they're attached to a battery, don't cut across both of them. Just cut 1 wire at a time and make sure that they are spread apart as best as you can, so that they don't short out. So moving forward with these guys, let's move the soldering iron off to the side. It goes back up there. This put away. This off to the side. We don't need to solder right this second. That's gonna go over there. We'll deal with the speed control after this. All right. So basically, I'm gonna shorten the wire on my new WB racing servo, the RG300 LP. It's a shorty servo for 10 scale cars. Runs awesome. So on our servo, the white wire is depicted by a gray wire. The rest of the wires are black. So your signal wire is the gray wire, and the opposite side is going to be your negative wire. So the first thing you want to do, give yourself a little bit of extra room, but figure out how long you want to make your servo wire. Generally, what I do is where it comes out of the servo, I push it straight down against the chassis, and then run it along the chassis, up the receiver, and then give it a little bit of a loop at the top, and then drop in. If you do it directly, if you just pull it straight tight, like you just go the shortest bit you can, one, you need to account for flex because the chassis flex is going to change the way that works. So you want to give it a little bit of extra room. You don't want to go direct to the receiver. And the second thing is like if you make it too short, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be really hard to plug into the receiver for the first time. And then if you get it in there, it's gonna be super tight. And then yeah, it just becomes a mess. And now you're too short to change it. So it's always best to give yourself a little bit of extra room. Just a little bit. It'll still look clean. You're getting rid of, you're going to go from this tall of a wire to maybe this tall. So you're going to get rid of a couple inches. That's gonna not be just weeded up in your car. And then the other reason to do this is that when you have all this wire stuffed in here, because you're going to go back and forth a few times, if it's bouncing around, it's going to end up coming out. It can get caught in something. It could come outside the body and be floating below the chassis type of stuff. You just don't want those types of things happening because those could cause a failure during a run or just make issues for you. If you can prevent them just by shorting the wire, I would recommend doing that. So what I do, push it straight down, get into the receiver, slide it up a little bit. I'd say maybe 5 to 10 extra millimeters of wire. And then we'll just pull it out. This one, I know I just said don't cut across all the wires. There's no power going in the servo right now because it's unplugged. And then you just cut across. Cut it straight there. Now, you have to think about how you're going to put these plugs on because you want to make sure they go in the right direction and there's a top and bottom to these plugs. So if you put them on this way, facing down, when you go to plug them in, it'll plug in backwards. It won't hurt anything, but it won't work. And then you have to unplug them, switch them around, and then plug them back in. So your negative wire is going to be on this side. Like your signal wires on this side, your negative wires on this side. So the plug is aligned that way as well. So signal wire is going to be on this side and your negative wire on this side. So everything's in a line. So you just cut the wires and separate them because they're going to be stuck together. The servo wires always come stuck together when you cut them mid. Split them up. Give it about, I don't know, maybe ½ inch of extra of wire to kind of work with. Split them up a little bit. So then when you have it, you should be, when you're ready to go, you should have those wires just sitting there like that. All right. These, a lot of servo wires, yes, they are tiny, but the wire is usually thicker than like the fan wires. So now we go back to whatever wire stripper you start to use, whether it's a real wire stripper or scissors or whatever you want to, however you do it. I use scissors, and then this one. So when there's really, really thin receiver wires, such as I believe Hobby Wings, their stock spec ESC, they have a really, really thin wire that they use for the RX. And generally with that thin wire, it's not going to get a really good connection. So what you do is you strip it a little bit longer, fold the actual stripped wire in half, and then clamp that in there, and then it gives you a little bit more wire to work with. The insulated part of the wire will still go as normal, but the stripped wire will be doubled up and it'll fit like a normal wire. And if you would like more information on that, just let me know and I will help you with that as well. But for this, we're just going to cut a little bit of wire off strip it back a little bit. These kind of, you want to be really patient with these. Don't don't rush these because again, if you cut extra wire off, you're just using less wire that you're going to get a connection with. So just go ahead and take your time. No need to rush on this type of stuff. Not enough. So we'll make sure you take your time. Okay. So now we have our wire stripped. You can see right there at the tip of those things. It's about how much you want. So again, it's not a lot, but it's just enough to get into the crimp without going too far and creating a spot where the wires can short out. Now what I do is when I'm going to start with the negative wire and work backwards towards me. So the way that I do this is I bend all my wires back. So I just have the one exposed. Okay. So now this is where it kind of gets tricky. It's a lot easier to do the electronics when they're out of the car. But what I would recommend doing if you're going to do it that way is get it to where it's about to mount on the car, measure everything out, and then do it outside the car, then put it back in. Because now you have to deal with a shock tower, a shock, an arm to get your tool in there. If you have it just out here on the bench, you're just working with wide open space. So with this, let's see, we actually have a comment before we start doing this. Check out Hanson Hobbies. The terminals they sell have tiny barbs that bite into the wire. Available in bulk and super cheap. So Larry, if you check the comments, mentioned where you can get another set of these pins. So also check that out as well. All right, so moving forward, we're going to go and put our first pin on. Try and isolate your first wire as much as you can. Get it as far out from the car as you can. That's going to help you when you try to get your crimpers in there. Personally, when I'm doing it in the car, I like to hang the car off the table a little bit so I can not rest them, but like have clearance for the crimpers at the bottom. And then the other thing that I do is, because this is going to be really hard to see. So you can kind of see that there's a V that they have there. Well, the crimpers don't have really that much of a V there. So what I do is I crimp them just a touch. So a little bit straighter and easier for the crimpers to kind of gather. So now we have, I mean, again, it's going to be hard to see, but now it's more of a U rather than a V. Let's see. Somewhere in there. Like that. And then push the wires down and then line it up and take your time on this. This is like one of the most annoying things to do, in my opinion. So take your time, make sure that your wires are lined up, and then don't just crimp down right when you think you got it, because what happens if you do it too quick, it moves and then you missed, and then you have to redo it again. If you crimped it down too far back, you could have connection issues. So just go really slow. Just nice, easy squeeze. And then it's going to click. And then as soon as you get all the way down, it releases. So then nice and easy. Line it up to where you think you got it. Yeah, see. The wire is going to move on you. So this is like, I'd say out of everything that we're doing today, this is going to be the trickiest part to kind of line up and keep consistent. So once you kind of get it in, slowly squeeze all the way down. So, and then just double check, make sure you get all of it, the whole area in there. I like to go, so on this one, I use, let's see, it's going to be hard to kind of see, but we use the second one, and then I go to the end, the far end, to double kind of tighten it down a little bit. So you gather it all, get it, make sure it's all lined up with the second one, and then you use the outer one to get it fully tightened down. Okay. And then we move on to the next wire. So then we bend this wire that we just worked out of the way, move the middle one to the center, and try and keep these out. I have made the mistake before to where I didn't get the one of the the next wires, the previous wires out of the way completely. And when I crimped down the second wire, it smashed the other wire. So you'd be very, very, um, just really know where your wires are and how everything's kind of going. Like I said, just take your time. It's easy stuff to do. It's just you just gotta take your time and know where everything's at and how everything's sitting. Like I shouldn't have these underneath the chassis. It should be over here. Again, just kind of prep your pin a little bit. Close it in a little. You don't want to go too far. You just want it to be a little bit more square so that when it meets the face of here, it doesn't have the option of going out or in a different direction. You want to just follow the arcs and go straight back into the wire. Slide it off a little bit. Make sure that you have a little bit of room. Then just slowly squeeze, and as you're squeezing, make sure that it's lining up, and then crunch it down. Now, just finish it off here. Use your tightening section to make sure it's nice and tight. And you can do it a couple times and make sure everything's aligned and everything's solid. I'm sorry for my runny nose, guys. This cold's been kicking my ass. Okay, now we're on to our third wire, and we're just going to repeat the process from wire 1 and 2. Close it up a touch, a little bit easier to work with. Make sure your wires are pushed out of the way. You're only using your one wire that you're working on. Push that down, align it a little bit, see if you can kind of make it so it's easier to get to. And then line it up, slowly squeeze, and locked in. And then the same thing here, lock that one in, and then crimp everything down to make sure it's nice and tight. And we're good to go. So now, let's see here. Get it lined up right so you can see it. So now that we have all our pins on, nice and solid, ready to go. Take your plug, make sure that you have it all in alignment. So another hard part, everything's tiny. These little windows need to line up with the little clip that's on top of the pin. So that's how they lock in, and then they don't come back out. So then we slide these in. So it should look like that. So your pins are all in alignment. The windows are facing up because that's how you crimped them. And then all you do, just slide them all the way in. Make sure that your little windows, make sure that all the little silver clips are in the windows, and you're solid and you're ready to go. Give them a little bit of an extra tug just to make sure that they did latch on and they're not going to pop off. And then you just plug it in. There we go. And push the wire into where you want it. And now we've got a shortened wire that's not going to get caught in anything, and it's a little more hidden than having all your wires bunched up between your ESC and your servo. And then you can see your nice WB Factory Racing logo right there too. So that's how you do it there. We'll move this car out of the way, and now we'll do it one more time on ESC. So this is where it makes it. This is where the only thing I want to show here is just lining up the length of the ESC wire. Because for me, what I like to do with these wires in a tool buggy, 4-wheel drive buggy, in most cars where you can do it, is you take your ESC wire and you run it underneath the speed control, and it comes back up past the capacitor and then directly into your receiver. So what it does is basically you don't see the ESC wire until it gets to the receiver. So that's the goal that we want to do. This is how you do it. So your receiver is going to be on the outside of your capacitor. So you already know where it's going to end up, but you need to leave a little bit of gap on this side and a little bit of this side. So you roll it underneath, wrap it up on top, and then run it to halfway across. If you have like a motor fan right here to where it's tall, run it halfway across your fan, cut it right there. And that'll give you, it'll give you the length that's short enough to where it'll be clean, but give you a little bit of extra in case you either make one, a mistake, or two, you run a different receiver. This will give you enough room because you're actually going to end up cutting it to where it's right here. So, you mean if you really want to, if you want it to be perfect, you can cut it down a little bit less. But again, when you try to unplug it from your receiver, it's going to get stuck and it's just going to be a pain in the butt. So if you give it a little bit more length, you get a little bit of a loop and it looks cleaner. And it doesn't have, you don't have to worry about the ESC wire getting too short and not be able to reach the receiver, no matter which receiver you're running. Because you can go farther, you can go closer. It'll have a little bit of a loop, which might not be super perfect, but it's going to allow you to change your speed control, change your receiver, and not have to rewire it again. So this one, we'll just cut it right here. We'll do exactly what we had here. Now with speed controls that have black wires all the way through, it's really important that you know which wire is which. Again, it's not going to be the end of the world, but instead of having to do it twice, you have to do it once. So with this one, we'll just cut this off here. So with Hobbywing speed controls, you're on your receiver wire. Let's see if we can get past this light here. Your negative wire is always going to be on the inside of the case. So it's going to be facing the inside, like the center of the speed control. This will always be your signal wire. So as long as you remember that, with Hobbywing speed controls, it's going to be like that. So before you make any changes to your speed controls, if with a different manufacturer, make sure that you know which one's the negative, which one's the signal. It makes your life easier in the long run. What you can do to make that happen a little bit easier is take a silver Sharpie and mark your signal wire, or if you want to mark your negative wire, you can do that too. It's whatever you want to do. But just make sure that you know which is which, and it'll make your life 10 times easier. So again, now that we're working with, see, I like to use a little bit of a mount to keep the wires, or to keep the speed control from moving. Signal wire facing you, negative wire facing the back. Always going to be that way, no matter what. Because the pins always go a certain way, the plugs always go a certain way. So the easiest way to do it is to make sure your signal wire is in front of you and your negative wire is on the back side as far as you can. So that's how you know you're going to wire it up the correct way. Let's see what we have here. Got a couple seconds. Are the crimps directional to the pin? Yeah, yes and no. Basically, you're going to use on these ones, the right side, if you're holding it away from you, the right side is the one that's going to crimp down. The left side's a little bit taller, so it doesn't actually meet with it. Once you start to use it and you look at them, I mean, it's you can kind of see that it's split down the center. Yeah, if you can kind of see the offset there. One side's smaller than the other, so that part's going to grab it first. And I always use, let's see if we can get this here. So we use the second one in first to get it lined up and then hold itself. And then you use the farthest one out to tighten it down and make sure that it's got a good bond. So then we're going to do the same thing. Split your wires up a little bit. Same thing as the servo. And then start with your negative wire, or I mean, you can start with any wire. I like to work. So we know that our signal wire is in the front, our negative wire is in the back. I start with a negative wire and work forward, so I'm not working across any wires. I'm working I'm passing the wire gets finished, we move forward. That wire gets finished, and we get closer. So start with your negative wire, and then do take a little insulation over here. Strip that there, so that's fresh and ready to go. Do the next one. Nice and easy. Just again, anything with wiring the car, just take your time. Make sure that you're doing everything the right way the first time, so you don't have to cut. Because I've been there to where it's a customer car, and I'm working on it, and I've cut it too short. And when you cut it too short, that means you're opening up the speed control, you're wiring it up, you're putting a new lead on, and that's even more difficult to do. So, and in some cases, some speed controls you have to send back to the manufacturer because they have sealed boards, and that makes it a lot more difficult to deal with. So, what I would recommend is just take your time again, and just make sure you do it right the first time. It'll make your life a lot easier than trying to rush through it. Definitely do it when you have some time. Don't do it right before a race. Give yourself a little bit of time. Just do everything right the first time and be smooth about it. So again, we'll grab some of these. Take off 3 of them. The other thing I've done before is where you go to crimp a wire or one of these clips onto there, and what happens is you miss, and then you crimp one, and it's not like they're expensive, but you crimp one, and then you just gotta throw it away because it's not gonna open back up. So nice and easy. Start it, kind of close it up a little bit so it's not such a wide V. So it's nice and easy. And it's going to hold your wire in there for you. You can kind of adjust the speed control so the wire is facing the direction you need it to. And then we'll just lay the wire into the clip. Lay the clip into the tool. Clamp it down. And then we'll clamp it again. And then we'll go into our smaller section and clamp it one more time, another time, and then we're locked in. And we'll go to the middle wire. And again, we're working from the back wire to our front wire. So our negative wire to our signal wire. This is in order to keep it in line and not kind of cross over anything and make it more difficult on ourselves. All right, so then we're going to do the same thing. We crimped it a little bit to get it started, lined it up, and we're going to slowly just crimp it down. Make sure everything stays aligned. Do a double check. Crimp the other end on there, and then we're going to tighten it down with our smaller section, make sure everything stays aligned, and we're solid. And then last one, start it, and then line it up, make sure everything's good and aligned. This one is a little bit tricky, so make sure your wires are out of the way. Bring this down a bit, and then put your clip on there. I'm going to clamp this one a little bit too small. Yeah, I did. Okay. So if you do clamp one too small, don't try and force it. Just throw it away and start with a different one. Because if you do it too close, when you go to clamp it down, the wire is just going to smash the clips to the bottom, and then it's not going to hold, and then you're going to waste. It's not going to get a good bond. If you run it, it'll probably end up having a wiring issue, and you're not going to like that. So just grab another one. Make sure you don't clamp it too far. Just a nice little bit. So it holds. And then you lay your wire in there. There, that's much better. And then just slowly squeeze and lock everything in. Now everything's in there solid. We'll grab another one of the plastic ends. That one. This kit comes with both the kind of Futaba style ones and the Sandwell style. for the kit, it says to use. It basically wants you to use the Futaba style ones for these types of connectors, and then the sandwall ones for the female end of the servo extension. But since most of the receivers, if you're using sandwall, use these. I just use these, the sandwall style ones, for all of it. And just push it in, make sure it's all nice and tight, and there you go. Now you have a speed control. It's got a fan wire attached to it. It has your capacitor soldered onto it with minimal wire. It's got all fresh wires here for your motor and battery. And now we've shortened this lead to where it's just the right length to go right into your receiver. So that's actually going to conclude what we're going to do today. If you have any questions about anything else, feel free to ask. I'll leave it open for a little bit. While I clean up here a little bit. But yeah, that's what we did today. And got everything finished here. If you like this video, please share it. I want to try and get to be as helpful, really just kind of work on being as helpful as I can to everybody. If you learned something today, pass it on. I just want to see, like, as much as I want to do all the work for wiring, I also want to see people learn how to do it themselves. I think it's a good tool to use, or a talent to have, because then you can just help people at the track. So if you know what you're doing, you can clean somebody else's wiring up. You can help them. You can help them learn how to do it, and then this hobby is going to grow more. And that's really what we needed to do before anything else. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. I'll go and answer them. Doesn't have to be about wiring. Could be about anything, whether it's racing, questions about setup, anything you might have right now. I'll leave it open for a little bit while I get things going. So there. Willoughby, peace. I'll see you at 4 for a bike ride, right? Yes, sir. All right. Sounds good to me. All right. So I don't see if there's any questions. So we're going to go ahead and close it up today. If anybody has an idea for next Monday, let me know. We'll do, we're going to start doing it on YouTube from now on. I think the YouTube has a bit better reach. I know I've been blocked on Facebook from doing live videos there. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know really what the deal is, but they seem to do their own thing. So we'll be using YouTube for all our Wallie build stuff. We're going to start posting. We're going to start doing like edits to the team. We're going to start doing most of our giveaways and stuff like that when we get them through here. And all of our Monday updates will be on YouTube from now on, no longer on the IG. So if you can, please share, subscribe to our channel. Let's grow this and see if we can help as many people as we can. So I appreciate you guys that checked it out. Hope you guys learned something. If you want any more information on that stuff, feel free to message me on any of the social media pages. I'm trying to get better at answering those quickly, but I will always get back to you regardless of how late or slow I am. I'm getting better at it, though, I swear. But Yep. Oh yeah. Saw another comment on there. Measure twice, cut once, always. All right, guys. I'll see you guys next time.